Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let's wait for 5-10 seconds until all participants have joined and entered into the webinar, and then we will be starting very shortly. Welcome to all of you. Good. I propose that we get started. Good morning to all. My name is Aziza Akmouche. I'm heading at the OECD, the division that deals with cities, urban policies, and sustainable development. And it's really my pleasure and an honor to kick off this webinar that is launching the result of almost 2 years of work between the OECD and the city of Bonn, and launching this report on a territorial approach to the sustainable development goals in Bonn, Germany. I would like to welcome the mayor of Ashok Sridharan, the director of the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities, Lamia Kamal Shawi, or great partners in crime from the local team in Bonn, Verena Schwarte and Stefan Wagner, and also a number of representatives from either pilot cities that have contributed to this policy dialogue. And I'm thinking in particular of the city of Moscow with Emil Petrosyan and the city of Kitakyushu, and also representatives from the federal government. Thank you very much, Daphne, for being with us. We'll spend about an hour and a half together. The last half an hour will be devoted to Q&A. The mayor and the director will have to leave us after their introductory remarks. So if you have questions that are specifically directed to them, I invite you to submit them through the question icon of this GoToWebinar, and we'll try to take one or two. Let me maybe share with you some housekeeping arrangements. If we go to the next slide, you are all by definition muted. We are having a social media campaign in parallel to this webinar. Feel free to share, to comment, to tweet, retweet. This is the OECD Twitter account, OECD_local. We are also sharing with you on the chat a number of links so that you have some background information for this webinar. For example, the link to the synthesis report on a territorial approach to the SDGs that was released back in March, that gives the umbrella framework for these case-specific publications. The link to the report we are launching today, feel free to access it, to quote it, to use it on a territorial approach to the SDGs in Bonn. And we are also launching a link to a major data set, an online tool where you can find data on measuring distance of 600 cities and 600 regions from the SDGs. Those are the links. You'll find them on the chat as well, real time. We'll have a series of interventions. And as I said, the last third of the webinar will be devoted to your questions. Let me now start by giving the floor to the mayor of Bonn. Thank you very much, Mayor Ashok Sridharan. Very happy to be with you here, and many thanks also to colleagues from Daring Cities, from Bonn Municipality, and from ICLEI for joining forces for this webinar. Today, if we're with you in the room, we would be handing over the reports to you. We are going to do this virtually now, but Mayor, we are very delighted to hear from you on this dialogue and the publication we are launching today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aziza, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure for me to be here at this panel discussion today for the launch of the OECD report on SDG implementation here in Bonn. I'm very grateful that the city of Bonn is part of this program as one of the 9 pilot cities and regions worldwide. My thanks also go to the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development and to the service agency communities in One World on behalf of Engagement Global for both for enabling our participation through their generous funding and for initiating accompanying the entire process. The Agenda 2030 plays a very prominent role for Bonn. The city of Bonn started to work on implementing the agenda shortly after its adoption by the United Nations, when the City Council took the decision in early 2016 to support the local implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. Building on this, Bonn developed its first sustainability strategy in a 2.5-year participatory process. That strategic framework, which was adopted in February 2019, sets the guidelines for integrated long-term sustainable development in the city up to 2030. The importance we attach to the agenda is also reflected in Bonn's engagement on the international level to showcase the role of cities. In this context, I showed my personal commitment by taking over the presidency of ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. This goes hand in hand with Bonn's support for international dialogue at conferences like this Daring City Conference. We thus very much welcome the fact that the OECD promotes the territorial approach on the SDGs and generates increasing attention for the role of cities and regions. This is why I was also more than happy to join the OECD Champion Mayors Initiative for Inclusive Growth. It was also a great honor for us to host the second OECD Roundtable on Cities and Regions in December last year. Bonn benefited a lot from its participation in this project. The interaction with the OECD gave us great incentive to work even more systematically on advancing sustainable development. It directly influenced both the compiling and the further advancement of our own sustainability report. Through the OECD's work on SDG monitoring, as well as hearing from other pilot cities like Kita-Kyushu, which completed a voluntary local review as early as 2018, we also explored more specific SDG-directed reporting. These ideas and the exchange with New York City on voluntary local reviews encouraged us to develop our own voluntary local review, which we presented to the UN just last week. With that review, our strategic policy framework is now directly linked with the SDG monitoring. With these recommendations, the OECD report on Bonn gives us much food for thought regarding our SDG implementation. The report shows where we are at, how we are performing in international comparison, and where we can do better. Stefan Wagner, our head of international affairs, will present you with more details on the findings of the report later on. The report also looks at the larger context of local level SDG implementation, which we think is very valuable. By calling for more vertical coordination, the report will underpin our advocacy for cities playing a bigger role in the SDG implementation process. I strongly believe that we will and that we must strengthen multi-level cooperation. But no city, no region, no nation can do this alone. This is why the OECD program on the territorial approach is so valuable, because it helps to get everyone on board. So thank you again for the opportunity to join this network, and my compliments to the excellent work done by the OECD. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And again, if in a different world we were in the same room, we would have a big round of applause right now. Thank you so much. And let me commend you and your team not only on the leadership, but on being a great source of inspiration for many cities around the world, while using the SDGs not as a compliance agenda, but as a way to rethink completely your local strategy, planning, budgeting, and investment priorities from the ground up. And we've already heard a number of cities in particular with the voluntary local review being on track now, taking a lot of this wisdom for their own specific case. Thank you, Mayor. Let me now turn to Lamia Kamal Shawi, the director of the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities. This is the place at the OECD where the work on local and subnational governments is located, and where this program on a territorial approach to the SDGs led by Stefano took birth, basically. Thank you very much, Lamia. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Aziza. Can you hear me well?
Yes, Chris.
Thank you so much. Mayor Ashok Sridharan, I hope I pronounce very well your name. colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here today to launch our new report on a territorial approach to the SDGs in Bonn, Germany. This report is part of a series of 9 pilot case studies aimed at supporting cities and regions to develop, implement, and monitor strategies to deliver on all SDGs. Mayor Sridharan, thank you very much for being with us today. We are really grateful to you and your team for the terrific collaborative work to deliver on this very important project. I would also like to thank the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany, BMZ, for its financial support, as well as representatives from 2 other pilot cities from our program, Kitakyushu in Japan and Moscow in the Russia Federation, for joining us today. So the case of Bonn is a perfect example of an urban area that combines economic prosperity with good quality of life. Over the past 3 decades, Bonn has gone from an administrative capital to an economic center, attracting people and firms. The GDP per employee in Bonn is the 2nd highest among all cities and regions in North Rhine-Westphalia. The urban area has developed as one of Germany's main business locations for information technology, telecommunications, and knowledge-based industries. And it concentrates more than twice as many patent applications as compared to the OECD city average. So this economic track record is really good and is paired with high-performing healthcare and lots of accessible green space. Actually, more citizens in the Bonn urban area have access to at least 1 hectare of green space within a 15-minute walk. This is not the case everywhere, and this is really a testimony that your city mayor is really super attractive. So these are just a few of the city's many strengths, but there are also, of course, challenges that needs to be addressed. The first one concerns the pressure on transport and the need to adopt a more sustainable mode of mobility. Residents in the functional urban area of Bonn use a higher number of motor vehicles, to be more precise, 49 per 100 people, than the OECD average, and commuting by private car remains the most popular transport option in the city. As a consequence, of course, air pollution has become an issue. Close to 90% of Bonn's population is exposed to microparticles at levels much higher than recommended by the World Health Organization and way above the OECD average. In addition, cities in Bonn are facing a shortage of affordable housing. This is an issue everywhere, of course, but in Bonn, housing prices have increased by more than 30% between 2014 and 2018. So if not addressed, Bonn may risk generating further inequalities and exclusion of disadvantaged groups, particularly within the aged population, where levels of poverty has become a crucial policy concern. And I know, Mayor, your great commitment and engagement to address inequalities within your city. You are a member of our network of champion mayors for inclusive growth that have really committed, that have engaged to put the fight against inequalities at the core of their city's agenda. So this is, I know, an important issue that is close to your heart. To address this issue and meet its ambition towards carbon neutrality by 2035, Bonn has adopted a sustainability strategy that uses the SDGs as a systemic framework to align climate, energy, housing, transport, and inclusion objectives. The OECD report that we're launching today provides guidance to the city of Bonn on how the SDGs can help institutionalize its 2030 sustainability strategy and ensure adequate support and resources are committed to its implementation, because what really matters is implementation. Building on our checklist for public action designed for this particular program, the report suggests a number of tailored policy recommendations. And let me highlight 3 of them. First, we believe Bonn should use the SDGs to strengthen the link between the climate agenda and the social and economic dimension of sustainability. How to do that? Well, Bonn can stimulate the provision of clean and affordable energy, as well as energy efficiency, to generate cost savings. These type of measures can have positive effects for low-income populations, as experienced by other cities. For instance, as part of the Swedish Million Homes program, Stockholm, the city of Stockholm, has been retrofitting energy inefficient buildings that were built in the 1970s and generated savings of 50% of energy consumption, which allow a payback period of 15 years. Another example to link the climate and the economic agendas is to support the creation of green businesses. Kitakyushu, which is represented here, a city in Japan, with whom we have been collaborating for many, many years at the OECD. The city of Kitakyushu has encouraged innovation and entrepreneurship in economic sectors such as offshore wind power generation, ecotourism and ecoculture, which offer job opportunities in particular to the youth while preserving the environment. The city of Bonn also needs to consider the social impact of climate measures. We know that this is one of the biggest challenges for the climate agenda to be implemented around the world. For Bonn, this means, for instance, taking into account the transport needs of a growing and elderly population when designing measures to reduce private transportation in favor of public transport to reduce air pollution. Second, Bonn should mainstream further the SDGs in budgeting processes to ensure adequate resources are allocated for the implementation of the sustainability strategy and the 2030 agenda. This will ensure continuity across political cycles. This means what? This means financial resources should be allocated based on local SDGs priorities, including that the city should roll out further sustainability budget within the city's budgeting process. This can also promote synergy between the multi-sectoral program of the sustainability strategy and the priorities of Bonn's climate emergency package. Third and last example of a recommendation that I can give you as an example, Bonn should accelerate its effort to further connect with the business community and leverage the potential of the private sector. Bonn has already made a lot of efforts to raise awareness of the 2030 agenda by organizing, for instance, the SDGs days in cooperation with local stakeholders. The Chamber for Industry and Commerce and the City Department for Economic Development also actively connect local businesses working on sustainability, but yet more can be done to support precisely private sector collaboration and to strengthen the city's Bonn's position as a center for sustainability-related SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises. For instance, a platform that allows businesses to connect with each other, as foreseen in the sustainability strategy, will be really timely and relevant. In Kópavogur, Iceland, which is one of the 9 pilot projects for this program, the municipality recently signed a memorandum of understanding with local companies to work on the SDGs, which is already providing results. These 3 recommendations that I gave you as example are just some, because there are so many details and more information that you can find, of course, in the report, and I invite you to have a look at it. Now, Mayor, I would like again to thank you for the fruitful collaboration with the OECD. I would like also to commend you for your leadership also as a chair of ICLEI. ICLEI has been partnering with us for so many years. So we are really happy that you are also a member of the Champion Mayor for Inclusive Growth Initiative and the chair of ICLEI, because we can even, strengthen the collaboration between these two networks. I think this report that we have been conducting together has proved to be an incredible inspiration for many cities and regions on how to use the SDGs to design, shape, and start implementing a local sustainability strategy from the ground up in close collaboration with other levels of governance. This multi-level approach should be praised. The question of multi-level governance is always one of the biggest obstacles for the implementation, because achievement of the SDGs relies, again, like in other areas, on a shared responsibilities across levels of governments, sectors, and stakeholders. I trust this work provides you with useful guidance to progress your sustainability strategy over the years to come. And we stand, of course, ready to continue to support you going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lamia, and also for your big leadership in this area of localizing the SDGs. I know the two of you will have to leave us shortly. Mayor, there is one question for you, if you wish to tackle it very quickly before leaving, which is related to the voluntary local review process. And it's true that over the past few months, we've heard many mayors being a bit skeptical about it because they would think that this could fragment the action of a given country, and in particular from the national and federal level in reporting on where they stand and engaging this multi-level dimension. You ended jumping into the VLR, let's say, journey. Could you tell us how you are shaping this in this relationship with other levels of government, and if you have any piece of advice for other cities that may step in?
Well, we here in Bonn, we do have a special, very special situation, because the BMZ, for example, is headquartered here in Bonn. So we are very close to our state government, which is in Düsseldorf. So there is the opportunity for multi-level meetings and multi-level discussion, also with many NGOs located here in Bonn and with the United Nations, because Bonn is the German cities for the United Nations, and that's why it is not so very complicated to get into contact and to also live the multi-level cooperation here within Bonn. But on the other side, yes, of course, it is special to be part of this and to communicate what we've done and what we are going to do. But I think there's no other way in getting forward to implementing the SDGs until 2030. And that's why I think it is very important to be on board.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And we see again here the benefit of physical proximity and spatial concentration of different players to foster that interaction and coordination, in particular in these difficult times where we are striving to substitute this physical proximity by digital proximity. Thank you very much, Mayor, for being with us for this important day. We trust this will be a useful input into your decision-making process. We look forward to continuing to work with you and your teams. Thank you very much, Lamia, for the kickoff of the project. And let me now turn to the duo, the tandem, that will be taking us through some of the messages of the report. And it's my pleasure to introduce Stefan Wagner and Verena Schwarte from the Department of International Affairs and Global Sustainability of the City of Bonn. You are both the architects of this beautiful piece of work. You have the floor to take us through some of the key messages.
Thank you very much, Aziza. It's a great pleasure to be here with this session today, and thank you very much for providing us the opportunity to present and share about the results of this report and the way forward to implement the SDGs in Bonn. Before I hand over to my colleague Verena Schwarte, who is in fact the project manager for this report on behalf of the City of Bonn, I would like to echo our mayor and all the others in thanking you, the OECD, and particularly you, Aziza, Stefano, and the whole team for this excellent cooperation in this project and for putting together this very valuable report. I believe this report provides a really profound analysis about the status of the implementation of the SDGs in Bonn and gives us recommendations and guidelines about our further activities, which we appreciate very much. Let me also thank our donors, the Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, as well as the service agency communities in One World Engagement Global, not only for their financial, but also for their technical support and advice, as well as all the partners and of the other cities that were working in this project. Now, I come back to you later on some outlooks, but I would like to give over now to my colleague Verena with some recommendations and first reactions on your report. Thank you.
Thank you. And Verena, just say next when you want the colleagues to go to the next slide. They're handling the PowerPoint.
Thank you. Good morning also from my side. And you can directly jump into the presentation. I will tell you a little bit about what we learned from this OECD project, where we started, where we are now, and how this is continuing. You can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, what were the starting points when we joined this process in mid-2018? We were in the process of developing our sustainability strategy, which is giving us the strategic framework for the implementation of the SDGs in Bonn. At that stage, it was still in the making, so to say. It was adopted in February 2019. We were also looking back on a long-term sustainability reporting that existed in Bonn. And at the stage when we joined the OECD program, we were at the point where a new report was due for a 3-year period, and it was the first one which was supposed to have a more detailed look specifically on the SDGs. And of course, we were also looking into our work on the international level, our engagement in international city networks like ICLEI, Eurocities, that the mayor mentioned, where we advocate strongly for the role of cities in the implementation of the SDGs. Next slide, please. I just want to give a few spotlights, which was of particularly importance for our collaboration with the OECD. I think a very strong element of the collaboration is the peer exchange. We had Kitakyushu here. We went to Kitakyushu. We had the chance also to be part of the Flanders mission that the OECD conducted. And this exchange and very detailed look into what other cities or regions are doing was very beneficial for us. We also benefited a lot from the dialogue with the OECD network partners that we met at the round tables with like-minded cities, but also institutions that push this work of the territorial approach. Our mayor mentioned that we also got involved into other OECD initiatives. And also the OECD, as we learned, is a very statistics-based institution, and we learned a lot from the development of the SDG monitoring tool, how it got a deeper insight into the development of indicators, how you can take that to the next level, also, which was at just the right point in time for us when we were working on our next sustainability report. It also made us more aware again of the strengths of a strong visualization, because I think that's what the SDG monitoring tool is. And also a deeper look into international benchmarking of cities and regions, something we hadn't really done in depth before. And it also helped us to get together with new partners on the ground in Bonn when we brought different stakeholders together for the missions, where we included partners that we sometimes had maybe not so strong links, for instance, from the social institutions, from the social sector, but also looking into the business sector. And I think that also established new links and also made these stakeholders see their links with the SDG agenda more closely. Next slide, please. Where do we stand now? The mayor mentioned already that we just launched our first voluntary local review, and I think here we also benefited a lot from the experience that we heard from Kitakyushu, which presented a VLR already in 2018. We now, Lamia mentioned the recommendation with the sustainable budget planning. We started this looking into 4 pilot areas of the city budget and including those for our next household 21-22 with a sustainable indicator set. The mayor initiated an expert group to advance the sustainability strategy, to involve further very high level stakeholders also. Our SDG awareness raising is continuously strengthened with also offers now going digital, since it's difficult to do public awareness on market squares in these times. And we're also working and looking deeply into what also Lamia mentioned in the recommendations, how to bring the council decision for climate neutrality up to 2035 together with the sustainability agenda. Next slide, please. So this leads us to what did we take, what are we still taking from the recommendation? That's of course to ensure a more holistic and integrative management of the sustainability and the climate agenda. I think the work or the collaboration with the OECD supported a more inclusive view on the SDGs and further strengthened the inclusion of social topics into the agenda and to show the interlinkages of the various SDGs. And I think with the VLR, we also responded to this recommendation to link reporting further with policy design. And of course, we are also very happy to support the call for more vertical integration. I think that's something that Bonn is doing very strongly already. And I think the report will be a very valuable backup for our call for the role of cities and that. And of course, we're also looking to advance the engagement with the business sector. We have started a few initiatives with company visits and including the business sector into our, for instance, information series with colleagues and staff. Yeah, that's a bit what we take from the recommendations. And you can see that that is also reflected in the outlook. And at that stage, I would give over to Stefan Wagner to dig deeper into that as well. Thank you.
Thank you again. Yes, on the outlooks, it has already been mentioned and by Verena, some of the aspects that we would like to look at, particularly in the future. This is, of course, to involve further stakeholders. We want to intensify our cooperation with the city departments, but also with the local community, in particular with the business community that has also been mentioned at various points in the report, but also with social actors to get a more holistic approach to the SDGs and a good basis for further action. We want to integrate our objectives. It has been mentioned that climate neutrality, which is a focus in Bonn, needs to be more linked with other issues, as for example, social issues. We want to have a stronger look at the need of elderly people, the fight against child poverty, which is an issue here, but also the promotion of affordable housing, as was said by the director at the beginning. I think these are areas that we have to give a stronger, more attention in the future to compile it with our sustainability approaches. We need to advance our performance indicators. Of course, the sustainability strategy and the VLR were just a baseline at the beginning, so we need to further evaluate, of course, our progress and adjust our targets and objectives where necessary. This is for us an ongoing process that we need to intensify in the next years to come. Lastly, to engage in multi-level coordination and cooperation. This has been mentioned a few times. I think Germany is quite a good example because we really work intensively on all levels, from the governmental, the federal governmental level, to the regional level, to the local level. We had a meeting, a workshop last Friday within daring cities, where we particularly focused on this approach. Of course, we as cities, we would like to have a stronger role in communication and also be part of the national local review to be handed in by Germany to the UN next years. So we are in good dialogues with all levels and hope this can become also an outcome of this endeavor have VLRs, and also is maybe promoted by this OECD report. So this is in a nutshell our outlook, and we are happy to stay in contact also with you, OECD colleagues, to help us to further engage into this direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Verena and Stefan. This is a big day. We are very proud that the results are now going public, and also that you're using them for the next steps of the implementation of your sustainability strategy. One of the points that you mentioned, which is of course not easy to capture in the report, is the invisible side of the dialogue and this peer-to-peer experience that you've had with other cities, because indeed each city of the 9 pilots was exposed for a week long, at least to 4 other different cities and regions. And this is a fantastic learning curve for cities engaging in this territorial approach to the SDGs. And we have today 2 of the peer cities that supported the dialogue with Bonn, sharing their wisdom, their headaches as well, their success stories throughout the process. And it's now my pleasure to turn to Masanori Nakagawa. You work in the Environment Bureau of the city of Kitakyushu. You are the Executive Director in the General Affairs and Policy Department. Masanori, it was really a pleasure to have Kitakyushu as a pilot per se, but also as a support to help other policy dialogues. You have the floor to share some of your messages.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me well?
Very well.
Oh, yeah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much. I'm Masanori from the city of Kitakyushu in Japan. First of all, I'd like to express our sincere gratitude to the mayor of Bonn and the member of Bonn, Stefan, Verena, and the OECD member, Aziza, Stefano, and Ikle, to invite us this wonderful opportunity. And also congratulate the city of Bonn for launching today's OECD regional report. This report will be a good reference for Kitakyushu, since Bonn and Kitakyushu has been a great peer learning partners with many similarities, such as pursuing sustainable city or like international cooperation long before the emergence of SDGs in 2015. So let me begin with a brief introduction of the city of Kitakyushu in Japan. Kitakyushu is located in the west side of Japan, and the population is about 1 million, one of the largest and manufacturing city in Japan. Next slide, please. And in 1960s, Kitakyushu city suffered from severe industrial pollution. However, we overcame it in 1970s with citizens' movement, especially the action by the Women's Association, which triggered the local stakeholder to agree on strict pollution control. Following this, Kitakyushu made tremendous effort to integrate the economy and the environment. We finally transformed into the well-known green city in Japan. That is why it is completely natural for Kitakyushu citizens to accept the concept of SDGs. Next slide, please. Kitakyushu has created unique SDG structures. Number 1, SDGs headquarters in the city administration operated by the mayor of Kitakyushu. Second, SDGs club with more than 1,000 citizens and private industries. Number 3, SDGs council by experts to support the city office. Because of that, the Japanese government selected Kitakyushu city as one of the best SDG city in Japan in 2018. Also, the OECD has accepted our city as a SDGs pilot city, only one city from Asia. As member of Bonn mentioned that we already issued the VLR, one of the first voluntary local review in 2018. Bonn city also just issued the VLR in the other day. That's why we are very happy if we work together to enhance the local SDGs and VLR in the future. So as for OECD's project, so what we learned through this OECD project, I'd like to share to everybody. So Kitakyushu had joined the OECD Territorial Approach to the SDGs. Among many recommendations by the OECD, I highlight the three crucial points. I think these three things are almost the same as City of Bonn mentioned. Number one, get involved with the local stakeholders. One of the good example in my city is the SDGs Club, having more than 1,000 stakeholders. Other cooperation with stakeholder is IGS Japan Research Institution. Regional office is in Kitakyushu. We receive a lot of considerable support from IGES, specifically to the Kitakyushu's VLR. Second, be aware of integration. Kitakyushu has made a great stride in the environmental sector, but also need to consider about the impact on the other sectors, social side and economic side. That is why in order to integrate these kind of three dimensions, the OECD advice is very crucial for us. Number three, deepen the relationship and the cooperation with other pilot cities. Next slide, please. So peer learning is a very important and very valuable especially with city of Bonn. Thanks to the OECD program, Kitakyushu visited Bonn and Bonn visited Kitakyushu last year. Kitakyushu learned many things from Bonn. For instance, the importance of political will by top leaders toward the SDGs. Kitakyushu also experienced the actual social program in residential area with cultural diversity in Bonn. And as for SDGs indicator emphasized by the OECD, Kitakyushu learned much in Bonn in the peer learning process from the forefront activity of the Bertelsmann Foundation. Through these peer learning processes, Kitakyushu discovered the various ways to tackle the SDGs agenda. Next slide, please. Finally, I appreciate the OECD and the Bonn's effort in publishing this great report and hosting today's amazing webinar. By exchanging our experience with pilot members, it's such as like a Bonn city or a Moscow city today, and by receiving some objective viewpoint from the OECD, Kitakyushu in Japan is always able to move forward to the higher level on local SDGs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Masa, for sharing some of the highlights of the case of Kitakyushu. This is also a teaser because your turn is coming for the launch in 3 weeks. The report of Kitakyushu alongside the report of Southern Denmark and Viken in Norway will be launched at the 3rd OECD Roundtable on Cities and Regions for the SDGs. That will also happen online. If you have not registered, those are taking place on the 16th and 17th of November. Please do so online in the webpage of the program Territorial Approach to the SDGs, or following us on Twitter, OECD_local for more information. We have 2 more speakers, 5 minutes each, and then, as I said, the last half an hour will be devoted to questions. Very important that you please ask your questions, not using the chat function, but the question function, so that we compile them and can have some interactions with the different speakers once we have completed the next 2 rounds. We were now supposed to welcome Mr. Emil Petrosian, the Deputy Head of the Department of Investment and Industrial Policy in the city of Moscow, Russian Federation. It's my understanding that Emil has had some connection challenges, right? So I will hand over to Elena Belova in the same Department of Investment and Industrial Policy in the city of Moscow to say some introductory words, and then be ready. We are sharing on the chat with all of you the link to a video of Emil that we will invite you to click on directly, individually, to see for a few minutes, and then we'll resume. Elena, maybe you wanted to say something as an introduction. You have the floor.
Dear colleagues, hello. I'm so sorry, but Emil has technical problems with internet. I'm Elena Belova, and let's start. I would like to welcome you to today's conference. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this event. You are doing really important work towards sustainable urban development. The Moscow government pays special attention to improving the quality of life in the city. Today, Moscow sets global trends. We teach solutions in the field of urban technologies, development of information systems, and e-services. We would like to show you the video describing how Moscow is moving towards the SDGs. The link is in the chat. In 4 minutes, I'll continue my speech.
Moscow is one of the largest cities in the world, and it's very attractive for investors. The accumulated foreign direct investments account to $228 billion, or to 50% in the whole country. Thus, Moscow and its government created a whole pool of organization widely covering various groups of people in order to jointly achieve the said SDGs.
The volume of most city payments has increased since 2020. This includes such categories of citizens as families with children, orphans, and seniors. The Moscow government is focused on the city's food market and forms mid-term forecast balances of the main types of food supplies. Moreover, the local authorities follow the policy of creating favorable conditions to organic products realization on the city's markets. The Moscow government is implementing the state program Capital Health that is aimed at improving the efficiency of special medical care. In addition, much attention is paid to cancer prevention. There are 2 social responsibility projects in Moscow that are being implemented in order to ensure the availability of preschool education in the city. The first one is Preschool Education Without Borders, and the second one is Moscow e-School. The Moscow State Budgetary Institution, that is named Crisis Center for Women and Children, operates in Moscow in order to help women in tough life circumstances.
A sustainable city is equal to an eco-friendly city. State programs of Moscow are aimed at achieving these indicators. More than 50% of the city is green areas with natural territories. Since 2011, more than 700,000 trees and 7 million shrubs have been planted. Moscow confirms its commitment to international priority in the field of climate policy.
Since this year, Moscow has been realizing the social program to facilitate generating employment in the areas where there is a lack of it. It gives the opportunity to developer to partially get rid of some payments if he builds an office outside the third transport ring. The Moscow government is interested in using eco-friendly vehicles in the city. The multifunctional migration center has been established in Moscow to improve the quality of migrants' lives.
Since 2011, Moscow refinery has been carrying out comprehensive technological and environmental modernization of refinery, also in order to achieve Goal 12, responsible consumption and production. In 2020, this year, the full cycle production complex was started, and it replaced 5 old refinery units.
The government of Moscow takes significant efforts on goal number 13, climate change. It is the development of green transport. It is promotion of sustainable consumption within our annual Earth Hour. Many schools have passed our online course on climate change. Yet, we have a long way to go. It is the development of sustainable green infrastructure, new green finance solutions, new cases on circular economy, and deeper public engagement in city development.
The state program Safe City is realizing in Moscow. It develops such areas and projects as there is a special online project that is devoted to Moscow cultural landmarks. It was created as a part of the global partnership and is on the front burner considering current epidemiological period around the world.
The next step is to spread the SDG practice to other Russian cities with federal development institutions involved.
Okay, Elena, maybe in a few seconds, and then we move to the next speaker, please, if we can wrap up on that front.
Yeah, thank you. In the video, we have tried to encompass all the major projects aimed at sustainable development in Moscow, but there are many others which we want to include in Moscow SDGs library. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Elena, and our best regards to Emil. Very sorry he couldn't join, but we're glad we have a short message from him in the video anyway. Let me now turn to the last speaker, and it's my pleasure to introduce Daphne Gross-Jansen, who's working in the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development in Germany. Daphne, we're very delighted to have you because this case study on Bonn was carried out in a very close cooperation with the federal level. We found this was a very interesting multi-level mechanism that you have put in place through BMZ, through Engagement Global, and we wanted to give you an opportunity to share also your views. Daphne, you have the floor.
Thank you, Aziza. I hope you can all hear me well. Good morning, everybody. Yes, it was a very interesting offer, actually. As you might be aware, Germany did take from the start, a whole of government and multi-level approach to implementing the SDGs. We do have a state secretary committee coordinating all the efforts of the national government and the local, that is the Länder governments. But obviously we do not have the possibility to integrate to coordinate with all the cities. There's about just around 10,000 municipalities of different sizes in Germany. You cannot coordinate with all of them, which was why we thought that localizing the SDGs through local sustainability strategies would be a good idea. And which is also one of this is because this will help us to get a more centralized, a more reflected approach, taking into account all the local necessities, all the different local structures, taking into account what citizens want their cities to focus on, which problems they think are most important. The BMZ actually came in because, as you have heard, we're responsible for development cooperation, not because this is some kind of development cooperation, but because we wanted to transfer one learning from development cooperation to the national sphere, which is that if you have many actors working on the same issues in one national territory, you do not get a good approach if there is no exchange on which strategies you're actually taking, which questions you're all focusing on. So it's a kind of south-north learning to support German cities in their strategy building. We also did want to nudge cities to integrate the global aspect and their international actions into their SDG implementation processes. This is where localizing the SDGs, in our view, links into decentralized development cooperation. If cities go cooperate internationally, and if they engage in mutual peer-to-peer learning with cities from around the world, we add another layer to SDG implementation, which moves away from the purely national sphere to really look at the international impact of your action and the possibilities to transfer your learnings to the international sphere, to your partners, but also to learn from the experience, most of all in our view of cities from the global south, because many of the issues the 2030 agenda addresses and the Paris Agreement address are already experienced much stronger in the southern hemisphere. So they have been working on the answers for some time already, and I believe that we believe that there is a lot of learnings we can actually draw from that. There was already a question on why there should be voluntary local reviews and if that was not a risk of fragmentation. It obviously is, but the German government believes strongly in multilateral cooperation. We do think that all the issues we need to tackle in order to reach the SDGs, in order to really implement all that we have agreed on in the Paris Agreement, we need multilateral cooperation. And we believe that for good multilateral approaches, we need to be discussing different viewpoints in the international sphere. This is why we do want to encourage cities from Germany and, if possible, from all other countries to report to the UN, to report on their path to global sustainability, because then we can take into account what really on the ground local approaches can teach us on SDG implementation, but also what the needs are that might not be seen purely through national level discussions. People in the local community might view things differently. They might just add insights that a national approach cannot add. We believe that cities can be strong partners. They are part of national administrations. They are part of political acceptance building, of political information. They have a strong connection to the local economy, to non-governmental organizations. We need them in the international discussions. We need them at the OECD and the UN level, and that is most effectively organized through voluntary local reviews. So in our view, all is in favor of local reviews, even if that means fragmentization of the messages we're sending out. I think that's most of what I can say for the moment. Let me add one aspect. We do also think that cities should be interacting on a city-to-city basis apart from national efforts. This is because we see that, of course, national level governments need to tackle certain aspects, need to tackle certain subjects. They might be more or less engaged in global sustainability. Cities at some point need to tackle certain issues. Our colleague from Japan just said that they had a reason to start greening their city. They had a reason to address topics that are now part of the 2030 agenda, and they might be acting despite maybe a lack of commitment on other political levels. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daphne. And indeed, your last point is something, this city-to-city cooperation, we've seen a lot of traction around in the different OECD countries we've been working on over the past 2 years. I mean, not only the inward-looking function, so how cities within a given country work with each other, and we see some places where umbrella organizations like VVSG, for example, in Flanders, help foster that peer learning within a given country, but also how cities of certain countries work with their peers in other countries. This dialogue process was exemplifying this, but the full trend of decentralized development cooperation and how it is being reshaped and rethought in light of the 2030 agenda, I think is very much underpinning this need for peer-to-peer exchange. So not everything needs to be vertical. Sometimes some horizontal between cities and between ministries is also to be appreciated. Thank you, Daphne. Let us now turn to the questions, and I'll pick a few while others are coming in. I remind our esteemed participants, we have over 90, almost 100 people online, hence we are functioning primarily with the questions. Please use the question function to drop your question. If it's going to a specific speaker, let us know whom, and we will handle the pipeline here. There are a few questions that relate to where we can download the report. So I suggest maybe on the OECD Secretariat, if we can share again the link to the Bonn report, and also as requested by one of the questions, the link to the voluntary local reviews that were mentioned. So Bonn, of course, maybe the local team can help us with that. And maybe we can also share the Kitakyushu voluntary local reviews for those that have not seen it. It's a very nice source of inspiration. The first question I have is someone asking whether you could elaborate a bit more on how in your different city sustainability strategies you are engaging with the youth as the driver of the transformation that is needed for sustainability. And I think it would be very interesting to hear from Bonn first, and then from Kitakyushu, and maybe also Moscow, if you wish to add to that. What are some examples of actions you are taking to engage youth, not only in the awareness around the SDGs, but also in the transformation that that is required to achieve there? So on Bonn, who would like maybe to start? Should I hand over to Verena or Stefan? Verena, you go first.
Yeah, I can maybe cite one example, and we've had this question also on the presentation of the VLR. It seems to be something that is generally interesting. In Bonn, or in Germany in general, the structure is as such that the schools are under the governance of the Länder, of the regional federal states, which is North Rhine-Westphalia. The city is in charge for external education programs, and also some parts of the infrastructure, meaning buildings, etc. So, for instance, one example that is very much strongly linked to sustainable education on sustainable development is our Climate Ambassador program. That is a rollout in all the primary schools in Bonn. It was initiated by one of our previous mayors, and it is getting more and more pupils on board that start in their third grade of education with a self-learning program on climate. It's dealing with a very specific figure from Bonn, the iconic lion who's called Bonnie, which is a comic figure meeting a little ice bear from the polar. And then they are exploring their household, their neighborhoods. And this program has a lot of effects, also children acquiring the knowledge themselves and asking their parents, why do we do this? Why do we do that? Or we should do that. And this has rolled out really into a success story, then going on to the next grade. And there's now a generation of children, so to say, that has gone through this program that call themselves climate ambassadors, that has been launched with the foundation from the Savings Bank in Bonn, and together with the city of Bonn, and also other initiatives that are involved in an advisory board for that. So that's one of the examples, but we are also, maybe Stefan Wagner, you want to elaborate a little bit on what we do now with UNESCO, what we plan there?
Yeah, we are just joined the Learning Cities networks of the UNESCO, and particularly one particular focus will be exactly on integration of non-formal building, which means non-formal education, which means those organizations that are not formally school education, to reach out, for example, to sport clubs and other areas where young people come together to make them more aware about the SDGs and how integrate their wishes and ideas into our concepts. But we are at the very beginning of this, so this will obviously be a new network that we launch within the city on this informal sustainability building education.
Thank you very much. Masa, can I invite you from Kitakyushu to elaborate on what you do with the youth?
For youth, yeah, so our current focus is on using the SDGs club. As I mentioned, there are many high school students or elementary school students involved in this SDGs club activities. And especially, I'd like to share one of the great example in our cities. And one of the high school members tried to create an emergency plan for earthquake or typhoon or cyclone like that. And then, but they are not only with them, but also involved with industries like insurance companies. They try to create the emergency plan together, high school student and insurance company, and then they try to teach to the elementary school students. So such kind of SDGs activity is our current focus, and we try to broaden such kind of activity to the youth generation, not only young generation, but also the senior citizens, in order to broaden the SDGs activity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Masa. Elena, would you like to say something from Moscow on that?
Thank you. We also try to encompass our students and schools, especially in achieving SDG. As in the video, Mikhail said that we try to involve our schools in the such projects as the Earth Hour, and we are going to expand this program to also high school. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. And Daphne, from the federal level, is there any initiative maybe you would like to, because national governments are also part of this awareness raising campaign?
There are measures for awareness raising addressed at young people. I can try to look it up and maybe share a link shortly. I did speak about the State Secretaries Council. There is a multi-stakeholder dialogue organized around that, and youth initiatives and networks are part of those stakeholder groups that we consult with. But obviously, it is more difficult for us than it is for example, cities or regional governments.
Thank you very much. There's a second question, which is more about the role that local universities and research centers are playing in the design and implementation of those SDG related strategies, and if you are actually considering as stakeholders per se. And maybe here again, I will invite the three cities, and we'll start with Bonn to explain and elaborate on how you make this policy science interface and how you engage maybe university and research. Verena?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we have done quite actively, because in Bonn you find a very strong scientific and academic scene, so to say. There are 6 research institutions which have founded the Bonn Alliance on Research. Stefan Wagner, you have to correct me with the correct name. And Stefano also got to know them. They were involved in the last OECD mission. They're doing a project on big data on sustainability. They did a big dialogue process also earlier this year. And they have been part of the missions and gave some inputs there, but also in the stakeholder group, both as well in the project working group that worked in the participatory process to develop the sustainability strategy, as well as in the expert panel. We have quite prominent representatives of the scientific community in Bonn, and I think that's one of the very strong inputs that has flown into that, because we have really very strong research institutions like German Development Institute, Technical University, Bonn Rhein-Sieg, which has an international center on sustainability. I mentioned the Bonn Alliance on Sustainability. There's a Center for Development Research, all very renowned scientific institutions that have had a representation in this process. So that's very important for us.
Thank you very much. Stefan, you wish to add something that captures it?
No, that's fine. I think it's an excellent description of the situation. So yeah, science is a very strong partner in reaching out and networking on the SDG.
Thank you. Matza, maybe in Kitakyushu, how do you work with universities and research centers in these SDG platforms and strategies?
Yeah, so it is very important for the local government to have a good collaboration with local university and research center institution. And one example is our main university located in Kitakyushu has one of the SDGs department. And the students measuring the SDGs course is always have a great activity inside the city of Kitakyushu. Like, for example, like picking up the waste or garbage, or taking care of children or seniors for helping them. Such kind of SDGs activity by university student is really helpful for local government. And we try to look as a local government, we always try to support them as a collaboration with stakeholders. And also the research institution is a very important factor for enhancing, implementing our SDGs. For example, like IGES Japan is always supporting our enhancement of SDGs. So as a local government, it is kind of sometimes a little bit difficult for local government to know the quick movement of worldwide SDGs. But such kind of research institution has always getting the new information and share with local government. That's why the collaboration, as OECD synthetic report mentioned, that the collaboration with such kind of stakeholder are the essential. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Masa. And I think in the same way, we keep saying that cities and regions have a role to play in all, or at least most of the SDGs beyond SDG 11 devoted to cities and communities. We do insist that universities and research centers also have a role to play in all SDGs beyond number 4 on quality education. And I think what you've explained in terms of providing the evidence base that can guide decisions, but also ensuring that this trickles down into new curricula and supports the behavioral shift that we need to achieve these targets is very spot on. Moscow, would you like to say a word about universities and research in your city?
Thank
Elena?
you. Thank you for your question. And you know, the Moscow City government tried to involve in achieving SDGs all the group of people. It's not only high school, it's also psychological organization. It's also business organization, different organizations and scientific and research that help us to achieve and to analyze deeply all the problems concerning with SDGs. And talking to our department, we also, with the help of high school, we organized some courses for our people, for example, to study these SDGs in order to analyze and study what is SDG in the whole, and to analyze its problems and solve and find decision for such problems.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. There are 2 questions left. I suggest that one of them we take it as OECD Secretariat, which is what is the role of small cities? It's true that we have here in this panel, you know, Bonn, Kitakyushu, Moscow. You are large, you know, metropolitan areas, and there's a set of questions on the extent to which small cities, small and mid-sized cities can also play a role in this climate adaptation and mitigation strategies and in the shift towards sustainability. And if you allow me, I'll get back to that one and maybe also hand over to Stefano for that. But there's a second question on multi-level governance. So someone is asking, and Daphne, if you allow me, I will pick your brain on that one, whether the mayor said that multi-level governance is the biggest obstacle, and if this is the case, which level of government? I think that statement was actually more from Lamia's introductory remark or experience from public policy design and implementation is that often the problem is not so much what to do. Everybody knows the technical, institutional, financial solutions. It's more who does what at which scale and how. And this is where this interdependence across levels of government, but also public, private, and non-profit sectors plays a very important role in the decision-making process. But maybe I can invite Daphne from BMZ and the federal level to share a bit on this multi-level dynamics in a federal country where, you know, this is quite natural. It's not the case in many other countries. But what's your take on that, on how SDGs have trickled down and also gone in a bottom-up fashion, and which role you are playing from the federal level to align the planets and make sure all hands are on deck? Daphne.
Thank you. That is a very good question. And I think there is no one good answer to it. We find in Germany that multi-level governance is both a strength and a weakness in this process. It's a strength because it allows us to really take locally adapted pathways and find solutions that work in certain areas that have different have to face different obstacles, that have to answer different questions. Of course, it's a weakness in that we have so many actors working on the SDG implementation that coordination is hard to achieve. But then it is our homework to go and organize it. It is our responsibility to talk to each other. It is our responsibility to create strategies that refer to one another, that build on one another. That is why we did in 2015 refurbish or redesign our national sustainability strategy in order to reflect the SDGs, so that the Länder strategies could draw on this federal level. And this is why we encourage cities to draw up their own strategies that can reflect what the other levels of government that they have to work with and that they receive funding through, for example, have already drawn up. So it is not an easy process, but it does cater to the need for locally adapted solutions. And then Germany is not a big country area-wise if you compare it to many other countries in the global south. So I do believe that the need for locally adapted measures will be even greater in other national contexts, where you may have, to tackle issues in more than one climate zone, for example.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Daphne. Let me now turn maybe to Stefano on this question on the small cities, and if you have anything to add against the questions that you've heard for 2-3 minutes, and then we will start closing the webinar with the next step. Stefano, please.
Yeah, thank you, Aziza. I think this is really a key question because we have been seeing for all the 2 years of the project that there are some big cities like Moscow, Bonn, or New York that were extremely active on the SDGs, but at the same time, there are also very small cities that take the SDGs very seriously. We launch cannot be considered a very small city, but Kopaogur already is not like New York or Moscow. This was the first report that we launched, and Kopaogur was the first municipality in Iceland to adopt the SDGs. And they really used, Kopaogur really used the SDGs to shape the new local development strategy, to work with the private sector, to develop a very sophisticated database to measure progress on the SDGs. But this is already, we can consider maybe Kopaugur like a medium-sized city. We also have, we saw, for example, working with Flanders, with VVSG, that there are cities that are maybe 3,000 inhabitants that are supported by VVSG, and they're really using the SDGs to better communicate with the citizens, to better work with other stakeholders locally, like the police. I remember an example from a small municipality in Flanders, or to better coordinate the work across departments. And I think, in particular, when you have this small city working on the SDGs, the action of association like VVSG, it is the Association of Municipality in Flanders, is even more important to help create a better coordination and to share information among small and medium-sized municipalities.
Thank you very much, Stefano. And this is indeed a very timely question, not only for the SDGs, but also for the new urban development paradigm overall, because what we are seeing with COVID-19 and the acceleration of the telework and the digital transformation is that the activity outside large metropolitan areas is going to develop in the coming years, and that this holds not only implications from an environmental standpoint in terms of urban sprawl amongst others, but also potential to have a much more balanced urbanization that relies on a system of cities of different size rather than only large metro areas that all can support productivity and growth, but also inclusion, in particular when it comes to inequality, which we know are much lower in small and mid-sized cities than in large metro areas. So thank you for that question, and definitely we have some representation of not metro areas in the pilots of this SDGs program, and we look forward to many more joining. Let us know if you are interested in the program. We are opening a new wave of pilots to carry out similar work as we've done in Bonn. Let me also invite all of you to join the third roundtable of cities and regions for the SDGs that the OECD is hosting. It will be on the 16th and 17th of November. You can go online and find the information in the OECD webpage, and we will be launching there 3 more pilots, as I was saying in the introduction: Viken in Norway, southern Denmark, and also Kitakyushu and Flanders, basically in Belgium. So we are delighted to go this extra mile. Thank you all, colleagues from Bonn, Verena, Stefan. It was really a joy to work with you and your teams. We have, as Secretariat, learned a lot. Thank you very much to Matsa and to Elena and Emil from Moscow and Kitakyushu for your time, your generosity throughout the process, your patience. We have also learned a lot from you, and I am sure colleagues from Bonn were very appreciative of your experience. Thank you very much, Daphne from BMZ, Sebastian also from Engagement Global. You were great partners in this localization agenda. There are not so many countries where from the federal level we put in place the right incentives for local and regional governments to jump into the boat because of that shared responsibility. And thank you also to my great team, Stefano, that everybody knows, but also those operating in the dark, Aline, Lawrence, Stina, who's been holding a great part of the pen for this report in particular, and Antonio also in the past few months. The webinar was recorded. It will be made live. Follow us on OECD_local if you wish to have the link to the webpage and the report as well, which I invite you to go and have access to. It's really a major source of inspiration in our efforts to learn from Bonn, to measure what's happening in Bonn, and to provide some guidance to Bonn. Thank you all very much. With this, we are closing the webinar, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next opportunity. Bye-bye.